All right, we are now recording. So first, I'd just like to thank everyone for taking time on your Wednesday evening to join us and talk about what our fall 2 volleyball season will look like. I know for everybody it's probably pretty strange to be talking about volleyball at the beginning of March as opposed to August. And the seasons might look a little bit different than what volleyball has looked like in the past, but we're going to do our best to try and make it as normal and as fun a season as possible. So I'm sure that throughout the presentation, you're going to have a lot of questions on what the season will look like and how it will play out. I'm going to do my best. Coach Capone, Mrs. Dupuy, we're going to do our best to try and answer all the questions that you have so that when the season starts, you'll have as much information as possible and be able to make a determination as to whether or not you want to participate in fall 2 volleyball. However, this will be a general overview. Specific information about how the varsity program might look or the JV program might look will be from your coach once the season begins. This is more or less just an overview of the season, what the protocols will be, and how we're going to function as a district. So for those students that are currently participating in basketball, so the girls on our basketball team, a lot of the information we're going to talk about is very similar to what you're experiencing now. The first thing I want to do, though, is I just want to thank Nurse Arlen, Mrs. Dupuy, and Coach Capone. There was a lot of work that went into the district being able to offer volleyball this season. So I'd be remiss if I didn't specifically acknowledge them for all of their hard work behind the scenes just to get us to the point where we're able to offer that. So thank you very much, Mr. Capone, Mrs. Dupuy, and Nurse Arlen. So the approval process for the district to be able to offer volleyball. Volleyball is what New York State considers a higher risk sport. And for a higher risk sport to be authorized for participation in New York State, first the local county Department of Health had to approve it, the Board of Education had to approve it, our school physician had to approve it, and then we send that off to the county to be able to participate. So the district developed a volleyball preparedness plan that was accepted by the Board of Education. It was approved by the school physician, and it's been sent to Washington County, so we are now set to start once the season begins. So the season itself is going to start on March 8th, and it will conclude by May 1st. In terms of actual season length, it's very similar to what the traditional volleyball season would entail. There will be a 1-week overlap between the winter and fall 2 season. So for those students who are currently participating in basketball, 3 practices will be able to be carried over from basketball to volleyball. However, you can only practice 1 sport per day. That includes games. So if you have a volleyball game on Monday the 8th, you can't go to a volleyball practice before or go to a volleyball practice after. Same thing if you have a practice on Tuesday, you can't have a basketball practice and then have a volleyball practice. Also, because there is that overlap that first week, the volleyball and basketball schedule will be in flux as we try to figure out who's going to be in what space at one time. So as part of each preparedness plan, we must include a telephone number as well as an electronic means for members of the community to report any concerns related to the district's safe operation of the sport. So posted in our plan, which will be posted on our website, and on the screen here, we have a dedicated phone line and a link to a Google form. And if there's any concerns from anybody in the way in which volleyball is operating, you can anonymously contact the district and let us know so that we can address it. So as part of our state-approved reopening plan for providing in-person instruction, as you all know, we use our gym as an instructional space and for delivering student meals. Because of the density within the gym for our classes and our lunch period, this has significantly reduced the number of student and staff quarantines that we've had to invoke throughout the school year. Without the use of this space, the district would not be able to provide in-person instruction within our current model. This, though, has then resulted in us not being able to use our gym for normal after-school activities. So as a result, we have to use our cafeteria for our practice space. So in basketball, as you know, we can only offer a varsity level program because of the space confinement. Volleyball is a little bit different. Volleyball season is paired with the soccer, cross country, and golf season, which those three sports are traditionally conducted outdoors. So that frees up time in our cafeteria. So for the fall 2 season, we're looking to run a varsity and JV level program that would be competitive, which means that they would participate in the Adirondack League, follow a more traditional type schedule. Unfortunately, though, we don't have the space availability, nor do the schools in the Adirondack League have enough modified teams to be able to run a normal modified program. However, the district still wanted to provide a modified opportunity for our younger students. So what we're looking to try and do is set up a modified intramural program. So that would be students in grades 6th, 7th, and 8th who would be interested in playing modified volleyball. We would try to set up an intramural program where that group would get together on the days in which the cafeteria is free. So if there's a JV varsity volleyball game in Argyle, that day perhaps we could run our intramural volleyball program for our younger students and still teach them skills and get them involved in the sport. More details on that will be provided once the season starts. We get a better idea of our numbers and can have a better structure of what that modified intramural program might look like. As I mentioned, varsity, JV, and modified will participate in the cafeteria. We're going to cap our rosters for JV and varsity at 12 student athletes. Although we're capping it at 12, that does not mean that each team will carry 12 student athletes. Additionally, depending on the number of student athletes that are on the team, we might have to limit the rosters for a travel roster. As you know, we're very limited into how many people we can fit on a bus. We can only put one student per seat on the bus unless students reside in the same household. So including our 2 coaches, there's only a maximum of 19 student athletes that we could potentially put on a bus to travel for an away game. So if we have 24 students playing JV and varsity, depending on siblings or residing in the same household, we might have to have a rotational travel team to be able to go to the different events. Because of pod integrity, making sure that our high schoolers are with our high schoolers, our middle schoolers are with our middle schoolers, we are not allowing any advanced placement for the fall 2 season. In order to participate, all of our student athletes do have to complete the required health history index, the informed consent paperwork, the concussion protocol, and a medical service permission. Additionally, if any students are considered high-risk students for participation in interscholastic athletics, like if your student has asthma, has a heart condition, something along those lines, we need specific medical clearance from your doctor allowing your child to participate. All of these documents are available at the school. They're also available on the district's website. And if you're interested in participating, if you haven't done so already, make sure you get those forms into Nurse Arlen. So if there's any questions, we can get those rectified prior to the season starting. If you're currently participating in a winter sport, if you're currently a varsity basketball player, you do not need to resubmit this document. All these documents we have on file, it's within a certain period requirement, so you're all set and you do not need to resubmit. No student can participate or try out until we have all of the required documents. Students also have to follow our academic and eligibility policy. This is Board of Education policy number 527. Due to our current situation with a hybrid learning plan, we have modified the policy. So right now, students will be ineligible to participate if they are failing PE. If you're failing PE, you cannot participate in interscholastic athletics, or if you're at the modified program in our intramural program. If students are failing 3 or more courses, they are also deemed ineligible. If you are failing 2 courses or 1 course, you are still able to participate. And as of right now, because we do not have a 10th period, there is no re-eligibility process. So it's very important that students are maintaining their academics and following through so that they can participate in our programs. Once the season begins, if the middle school or high school is closed for any reason, Say we're closed due to contact tracing, we're due to a potential exposure, there are no sports. If the middle school or high school has to be fully remote for a COVID-related reason, sports for that day are canceled as well. That would be part of the message that we would put out announcing that the district is closed. Masks are required for all participants at all times. The only time a mask would be allowed to be taken off is if the student is in a cooling off designated zone and they're separated by 12 feet or more from any other participant. So if they're working on in the cafeteria and the student gets overheated, they need to take a mask break, they would go out to a designated area that's separate from everybody. They can take off their mask for a break. Gaiters are not allowed unless they have ear loops. There's no valved masks, and there's no exceptions to the mask policy. If there is a medical reason that your doctor doesn't think that you should have to wear a mask, there is no exceptions. Anybody to participate has to wear a mask. We also have to take part in the daily screening process, just like students do to attend in-person instruction. If the student is already completing the daily Raptor emails, that would work. As long as they complete the Raptor once a day and can answer no to all the questions, they are free to participate. If for some reason you're not getting the Raptor, you accidentally deleted that email that day, or you're not great with technology, we can have paper attestations that you can fill out and bring. And every day, the coach has to maintain an attendance log that includes the names, address, phone numbers, and emails of everybody that was in attendance that day in case there's an outbreak and we need that for contact tracing. Just as a reminder, and just as for school, if you are not feeling well, do not come to school, do not go to practice. Right? If you are not feeling well, follow the protocols from the Department of Health and the flow chart that the school has provided to determine whether or not you should come to school, if you need to go see a primary care physician, if you need to get a COVID test. If you have a question, feel free to call Nurse Arlen, Coach Capone, Mrs. Dupuy, or myself, and we can walk you through that process and give you a recommendation as to how you need to proceed. Washington County has very strict quarantine rules. If there is a positive person at practice, more than likely everyone in that practice will be quarantined. Washington County rules are quarantines for 10 days from the last day of exposure. There's also the very real chance that if there's a positive person at a contest, the entire gym will be quarantined as well. So as you're making the determination as to whether or not you want to play, make sure you fully understand that you are taking that risk that if you go to Lake George for a volleyball game and there's a Lake George player that tests positive, there's a very real chance that you could be quarantined for 10 days. So this goes right back to that last slide where it's very, very important that if you are not feeling well, if you cannot answer no to all of the daily screening questions, do not come to school, do not go to practice to avoid potentially putting others into quarantine. If you are quarantined, whether you are COVID positive or you are considered a contact of a positive, we need a release note from the Department of Health to allow you to return to school and to return to participation. If you are COVID positive, we need a specific medical clearance from your primary care physician that allows you to start volleyball practice again. It's not just your period of quarantine is over. We need specific medical documentation from your doctor saying that you're clear to return to participate. So as I mentioned, we are using the cafeteria for all of our volleyball practices. We have to be very strict in who we are allowed into that facility. So the only people that are allowed in the cafeteria for practice are coaches, players, and administration. That's it. Parents are not allowed to enter, spectators are not allowed to enter, and non-Board of Education approved personnel are not allowed to enter. So if there is if your child is the manager for the team or the stat keeper for the team, they are not allowed to enter practice. Only the players and the coaches and administration. If a parent has a question or concern that they want to talk about with the coach, You need to reach out to the coach. You can always reach out to us and we can coordinate a meeting for you. But that meeting would take place separate from practice and typically either over the phone or virtually to avoid that in-person contact. Student athletes will enter the building through a designated door. Once they get to the cafeteria, they have to remain in the cafeteria. They can't wander through the school. We can't go to your locker, or if there's a teacher here that you want to talk to, you can't go talk to them. You have to stay in that designated zone, and you have to arrive ready to practice. The locker rooms are not available for changing. If you have practice on an in-person day, we do have a designated bathroom that you would use to change into your clothes so you can get ready for practice. On your remote instruction days, you have to come ready to play. Same thing for contests. You have to come ready to play. There are no changing at the opponent schools. So because we're using our cafeteria, we cannot host any games. Just like in basketball, all our contests will be away. We will be following the Adirondack League COVID protocols. Included in the Adirondack League COVID protocols are that there are no spectators allowed at the games. As we're doing with basketball, we're trying to stream the games so that parents, family members, and friends can watch the games online. But as of this point, there are no spectators. Now, depending upon how the COVID numbers in the region develop and vaccine distribution, that might be something that the league will consider later on in the spring, especially as we get towards the end of the season, potentially allowing senior parents to come for a senior game. But as of right now, no spectators will be allowed at any of the games. The only people allowed are those student athletes on the team roster and people that the district identifies as essential personnel. So that might be your scorekeeper or your team manager. But these people have to be consistent from game to game. They'll be included on the team roster and sent to the opponent's school so they know exactly who is in the building on that day, again, for contact tracing purposes. We will be following a league schedule. Basketball right now is really confined by county, so we're only playing county schools. Once the fall 2 season occurs, we will be playing our traditional Adirondack League schedule. So we will be playing Lake George, Warrensburg, Corinth, Hadley, Luzerne, as well as the Washington County schools. So just to reinforce our hygiene and safety, student athletes must provide their own supplies. There's no sharing of items. Any clothing, towels, and masks need to be washed daily. We encourage student athletes to bring spare masks just in case something gets spilled on the mask. That way you have a spare one that you can substitute. Shared equipment will be disinfected frequently by the district. Participants must follow proper hand hygiene practices, so there's no high fives, fist bumps, hugs, or any other types of celebratory actions. Student athletes must sanitize their hands before entering the court, after exiting the court, or at a break. And coaches must follow social distance regulations, remaining 6 feet apart from student athletes unless they're demonstrating a skill or a play. So when we travel, when we go to games, the daily health screening must be completed before arriving to the school, preferably through the Raptor system or that paper attestation. Our reopening travel protocols must be followed. Again, what I mentioned earlier, 1 student per seat unless they reside in the same household. Masks must be worn on the bus. There's no eating on the buses. Carpooling to practice and to games from parents is discouraged. And students need permission to drive themselves just as we do under normal circumstances. So if your child has a college visit or a doctor's appointment or some other obligation that they prevents them from riding the bus to the location, that needs to be cleared with Mrs. Dupuy and Coach Capone ahead of time. You just can't show up without any prior authorization. Food, there's no eating at the school or on school facilities or at school facilities for the away contests. Congregate dining is not permitted, meaning the bus cannot stop at McDonald's on the way back from Warrensburg. And there are no team gatherings as well. We're really encouraging all of our student athletes and coaches to make sure that they really strictly follow the social distancing protocols outside of school. With the quarantine rules, If one person gets quarantined, it could shut down the entire team for 10 days. It's a little bit longer of a season than basketball, but still, if we have to shut down for 2 weeks, almost a quarter of your season is gone. So we're really encouraging, please, 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 especially with the weather getting better, make sure we're still following those social distancing protocols outside of the school to ensure that we can maintain our volleyball program throughout the course of the year. So I went through our reopening plan with a lot of details pretty quickly. If anybody has any questions that I didn't address, please feel free to either unmute yourself and ask, or I did open up the chat box too. Feel free to type your question in the chat box, and then I'll monitor that and ask and answer those questions as well. Coach Capone or Mrs. Dupuy, is there anything that I neglected to mention that you think we should add in?
I just wanted to go over two things very quickly in regards to the academic eligibility. We will be using the 25-week grades, which that grade point period ends on Friday. We have been announcing this to the kids now for 2.5 weeks, so they have been made aware of that. Those will be the grades that we will be using to see if students are eligible to participate. And also our same rules still apply from our code of conduct and our interscholastic conduct, that attendance is very important. So even on remote days, you are still expected to attend classes and adhere to making sure if you do have to come in late for any reason that you are in the building by 10 o'clock or you will not be able to participate. So those things are still consistent from before, but just wanted to make sure that everybody was clear that those procedures will be still followed in our hybrid schedule as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mrs. Dupuy. So we did get a question from Mrs. G-Ball. How many days a week do we anticipate the modified program running? Once the varsity and JV start their contest and we have some more flexibility in the cafeteria, I would imagine it would run 2 to 3 days per week. Because I believe the varsity and JV will be scheduled for 3 games per week. So those would be the days that the modified program would be able to enter the facility. Does anybody have any other questions?
Hi, this is Elisa Arlen. I just wanted to add that for the modified program that we're going to run, we will probably likely have a separate shorter form that will go out for that. So you don't need to do that full health history, but there will be more of like an intramural type consent and probably a couple of medical questions that will go out for that.
Perfect. Thank you, Nurse Arlen. And as I said, more information about what that modified intramural program will look like will be forthcoming once the season gets started and we can work out those details. Karen, Karen asked if the forms will be mailed. We certainly can mail one to you. Absolutely. Yep. We'll post them online, but if you would prefer to get it in the mail, we can absolutely mail it to you. Any other questions? Well, I'll certainly stay on for a little bit longer if anybody has any other questions. But other than that, I appreciate you taking the time to join with us in this presentation today to go through our preparedness plan for volleyball. If once this meeting ends, you have a question that you forgot to ask or you didn't want to ask online, feel free to reach out to Coach Capone, Nurse Arlen, Mrs. Dupuy, or myself. We'll be more than happy to answer the question for you. And if we don't have an answer, get an answer for you. There will be modifications as we work through this season. So far, knock on wood, our preparedness plan has worked really well for basketball. So we've had a successful start to that season. So a lot of work has gone into this plan to try and figure out all the little details that might come up, but there might be bumps in the road, more than likely. And we'll just have to adjust and modify as we go through. But I appreciate your patience. I appreciate your interest in participating in volleyball. Like I said, I'll hang out for a little bit longer if you have any questions. Otherwise, I appreciate your time and hope you have a good night.
Hi, Andy. Nick Severance.
Hey, Nick, how are you?
Good. I had to step away from the call for a minute. I heard you at the tail end talking about a modified, is that modified volleyball?
Yes.
Is there going to be any kind of a soccer?
Yes.
Is that up for another discussion? I'm sorry. You probably went over this, but I missed part of it.
No, I didn't. You're just a day early.
Oh, all right. I can wait till tomorrow.
Yeah. So probably right now we don't have enough student athletes for modified soccer to run a full team. So we're probably going to run a modified intramural program for soccer as well.
Okay. That's
So
fine.
actually, it could be something too, where a kid, your daughter, she could maybe do modified volleyball and modified soccer. Well, I don't know. We'd have to talk about that because we're trying to avoid those dual sports. But
okay.
yeah.
Okay. I'll listen in for tomorrow too, Andy. Thanks for the info.
No problem. Tell Cole I said hi.
Oh yeah, I'm surprised he's not coming through the door yet, but any second he usually bursts through the door with the big hellos.
Tell him I said hi, please.
Will do, Andy. Thank you.
All right, take care. All right, well, I'm going to